Hello and welcome to Elvenhome, and to this, the last edition of the year, which rather fittingly brings together two projects to a conclusion: the creation of the market and most particularly the creation and build of my engine shed. So let's get straight into the video. It's a bit of a bumper one because of the two projects coming to an end, and take a look at the items that have been fixed onto the baseboard that will be inside the engine shed. Well, here you can see the layout of the internal side of the engine shed, which has now been tested to make sure that locomotives can get all the way in and not bump into anything. By and large, everything has set where it needs to be. The items in the center here have been spaced so that the supports for the central trusses, a central beam on which the trusses sit, fit in between them. And I had, by and large, everything else was in okay. This one, unfortunately, I originally had through 90 degrees, and it was very slightly too much over this side, but enough that when the B17 went in, it bumped into it and wouldn't go any further past. I'm sorry to say that we also had something of another industrial accident, because this poor little fellow was originally sited a bit closer to the rail, and unfortunately the B17 gave him a clip round the ear with its buffer beam. I'm pleased to say that he wasn't out cold for too long and has now been restood in his place, but a bit further back. So otherwise everything else has gone in and has been tested, and I've just tested before I filmed this part with the 8F, which is one of, as you may recall, is what has the widest motion of all my locomotives, and it goes in without either bumping into any item of machinery or enmeshing itself in the head of the fitter. You may be able to see, I will put up here, I think, I've just taken some footage getting in a bit closer so you can see things more clearly, that I've also been able to acquire some chain from Scale Model Scenery, which I think is fine enough to put onto the water cranes. So they now all have chain on their on the cranes that the enginemen or the fitters would use to pull the crane around and onto the tender, and then obviously pull it back again. All the track has been tested. The trains run in on all the lines, he said, crossing his fingers for when we actually do it. I did have to replace this section here. For some reason I used a slightly thicker piece of card, styrene card, onto which I put the paving, and I found, unfortunately, that as trains went in, of course, they got lifted up. The bottoms of the engines were being lifted off, so that had to come up. A thinner piece of card was put on, and a new strip of the cobbled paving, the Reditex cobbled paving, and it went in, re-weathered, which then gave me a very dirty track. That has now all been cleaned, and so a train traversed in and out of there as well. So that is really all the work that has been done to prepare for the shed to take its place. What I'm going to do now is we'll go and have a look at an item that is going to go into about here, of a water tower, because obviously this site needs plenty of water, and certainly it would need plenty of water here to feed the water crane. And I was looking on eBay and came across to me a new company, DAPR 3D, and a water crane kit which I've bought and painted up. So I'll take you over to the desk and have a look at there, and a bit later on we will come back to see the engine shed, and I'll show you how the wiring is hooked up from the back. So Let's go over to the desk and have a look at this kit. I had been looking for a water tower to put onto the layout. I wasn't much taken with the ratio kit that is out there, because I'm not much taken with ratio kits generally. And the other water towers were fairly small things that really wouldn't be right for the size of depot that I've now built. And the three cranes that are there, water cranes that are there, need supply from somewhere. And certainly in major depots, it was quite common for there to be a water tower. So by the power of Google, I came across a kit that was for sale on eBay by a company called DAPR3D, who I must confess, not come across before. And so I sort of bought it on spec really. And it came, and it was in it's a very simple kit, very few parts. And I'm afraid my enthusiasm overcame my need to record the process of actually building this kit. So you're getting the finished article here, but at least it shows, one, that it can be built. It came pretty quickly from ordering it on eBay. I'll come back to about ordering it on eBay in just a moment when I talk about some of their other products. It was a very simple kit. So there was the four sides, the roof, the cage to surround the entry, the ladder, the supports to give strength to the four legs, and underneath there's obviously the base, and then there was this piece that went to give some sort of shape to the underneath of the base. You've got the main pipe that supplies and draws the water, and two little wheels either side to control the flow of water. It didn't come with any instructions, but it did come with a QR code to use on your mobile device of choice, which takes you to the website. At least I assume it does, because I didn't actually need it. It was such a straightforward little kit. I'm really impressed with it, I have to say. I'm really impressed. There's a nice amount of detail, as you can see, on the kit. As I said, it went together very easily. There was very little flashing or anything that needed filing. And I really pretty much put it together in about, well, even half an hour would probably be stretching it to take as much time as that. And I'm really pleased with it. I think it sits on the layout really well, and it's exactly what I wanted, which was really good. When I went to their website, which they point you to as there are other kits, they do quite a wide range of some interesting buildings in particular and machinery. For those of you that are building quarries or thinking of mine workings, quite a lot of interesting kits there that you may want to go and have a look at. In the description below, there's a link to this kit, which actually is only available on eBay. I couldn't see it on their website, so it may be this kit is coming to an end of its life. At the time of recording, which is 25 minutes past 11 on the 29th of December, there were 9 available to be bought on eBay on the link that is in the description. But I was quite impressed. There wasn't anything immediately that I wanted to get from on the website at the moment, but they say that new products are going up all the time. And it's definitely worth having a look at, because there were some things there that I certainly hadn't seen in kit form, at least, for industrial locations. Well, here you can see the engine shed. It was rather good the first time I put this together and turned the lights on. They'd been looking very dim, but they were all running off of one 9-volt battery. Now that it's properly connected to the lighting bus with a proper flow of power, albeit at 3 volts, they've all come on just as I expected them to do and give a nice amount of light, which you will have seen, I think, from the footage that I put on, which didn't have any other lighting. You'll see that the water tower is now in its place. That's where it's going to live. And you can see coming out of the back the wiring. So the yellow and the red wire are coming from the lighting bus, and they are going through the unit that I bought from Kites Lights, which steps the voltage down from 12 volts to 3 volts. I'll come on and talk about the power distribution board, where I get more options as to the voltage that it puts out, but also it has a dimmer, and you'll see that I've used the dimmer a bit on the market stalls when we come to have a look at those. It's getting its power from these cables coming up from underneath the board, which are attached into the lighting bus that sits on the underneath, and from which most of the other lights outside of the buildings, which I've used the Just Plug system for, derive their power. So this really completes the work of the engine shed. This is what I had in mind when I finally settled on the overall shape, what I thought it would look like. And one of the great things about scratch building is that it allows you to take an idea and then produce it. I will take some footage at this point and get the camera down to look through the front to give a wider aspect than maybe you may have seen from train cam. But I do enjoy scratch building. I'm going to give scratch building a little bit of a rest because this has been quite some task putting this together. It's taken me much longer than I expected it to do, but I'm really pleased with the result. And taking the time over building each of the wall panels with, as you know, the frame that sits inside, which holds the window, using the glue and glaze for the glazing, which it looks brilliant. I have to say, I'm really, really pleased with that. And it looks more prototypical, certainly, than if I'd have, just as I was originally going to do, put a sheet of Perspex film between the two window frames. I will, when I can, get a bit more to go at the front of the layout, front of the engine shed, because I had intended more things to be there, but I think I want to see what it looks like with more locomotives there, because this wouldn't be overly full here, but you would expect perhaps, I've got some barrels that can go in there, perhaps on a pallet sitting somewhere, and maybe one or two other things. But I'm really pleased with this. This is what I had in mind. It's come together. It's taken an awful lot longer, as I said, than I expected. But it does give me the depot that I wanted in this area. And of course, it has the advantage that nobody else has a depot such as this, which is a jolly good thing. So, having completed this part, let's go on and go back to the principal subject of the last video. And I promised when the power distribution board arrived that I would talk you through and show you the power distribution board. The market itself has been lit, and that was lit before I got my power distribution board from China, because of the generosity of Mark Island from Piddle in the Marsh. More of that in a moment. Well, here you can see, as you saw, the lights all went on. I don't have any other lighting on at the moment, so these are maybe looking a little brighter on camera than they do in the room, with the camera compensating for the fact that this is the main source of light. I'm really pleased with the outcome. The light is just right compared to the rest, and I will take a bit of footage from further away and you'll get an idea of how the light balance is, I think, a bit better. At this point, I do want to say, which I've already mentioned, thank you to Mark Island. After the last video, and I mentioned that I was still waiting for the new power distribution board to arrive from China. but it was likely that it wouldn't arrive till early January. And he got in touch and said he had a spare power distribution board. Did I want it? Which was very generous of him. And he very kindly sent it to me by first class post. It arrived before Christmas. And I managed to spend Christmas Eve underneath the layout, chopping away at the forest of wires. I mean, I always knew, obviously, there would be lots of wire because there are 9 lights. Each has 2 cables coming off it. That's 18 cables. So there was always going to be a lot of wire. I think making each cable, each length of wire, 1.5 foot longer than it needed to be made it more of a forest than I expected. But I'll put up now a picture of the power distribution board under the layout with the wires wired into it. And after I've finished here, we'll go onto the desk and have a look at the one that came from China, because that arrived with me just after Christmas. So bless them, they managed to get it through quite quickly, because it wasn't meant to arrive until at least the 6th of January. But it does give me the opportunity to show you what you get now when you order them, because every time I've ordered them, what has arrived has been slightly different. And each time it's been a better product because there's been more added to the kit. And the latest was a switch, which I will show you. But that completes this part of the layout. The amount of light has worked just right by having it sited where I want it to be sited. A number of people quite rightly said that whilst there's lots of people in the market, of course, there's not very many people around it. And that was because I'd pretty much used up all the models from the 200 that I had, which were good enough to be used in this way. There's quite a lot of them that are, there's some that are seated, and there are some which have very little paint on them at all, and some of them are either nude or white. Now those I think I will spend a bit of time painting up, but I've also ordered and have received, very quick service, another 400 of these figures, because I'm really pleased with them, I have to say. I think the colours in them are sufficiently muted that they're not as garish as the colours from some of the products from China. There's not a lot of detail on these, so I wouldn't use this in an area where you're going to be able to see it up close. But I certainly think on some of the platforms which are further away, and if they're in parts of the layout which are less accessible, so the long bottom terrace, which is the street that runs next to the railway line at the back, I certainly will be using them to put figures there, so that, because you can't actually see those very close, but it will populate the area. And it's amazing the difference it makes starting to put people in, so that this becomes a living place, if you see what I mean, even though everything is inanimate. If I can find small children like this, then I'll be able to add to the set that Henrik sent me some time ago of children to populate the schoolyard, which is rather barren and bare at the moment. So that's enough on this part. Let's go onto the desk and take a look at the power distribution board. I'm not usually one for doing unboxing videos, but on this occasion I wanted to do that because, as I just mentioned, every time I get one of these power distribution boards, there's an added thing in there, or it's subtly different. So I wanted you to see exactly what came from China. I haven't emptied this, so it will be interesting. We can go on the voyage together to see what has come from China in this package, because you get more than just the distribution board when you order the kit. So the packaging has been subtly different every time I've ordered it as well. At one time it was a plastic box, but there seems to be more in here. Well, we'll I'll have a look at what those cables are in a moment. Oh, wow, okay. Okie doke. Right, so let's do the power distribution board itself first of all. I'm going to put this down here. Now there is a very good, we'll just zoom in a little bit, that's better. The company that I buy from on eBay, and there are links in the description, both to the eBay page from which I bought my power distribution board, and it's the same one as I've always been going to, but also to more detailed instructions on the power distribution board, which are really quite good. I've got them set up on, just to give you an idea of how good they are, because they're slightly pictorial. If I go up onto the screen, you can see them there, and there's a full set of instructions, but I'm just going to talk you through the major parts of the power distribution board and why I find them so useful. And as I said, I was put onto these by Mark Island. One of the best bits of advice and help that I was given, because this can avoid you needing to put resistors where you've got 3-volt lamps. Normally you would have to step the voltage down unless you manage to have a 3-volt supply in order to be able not to blow the lamps. This clever little thing can deliver the voltage to these terminals, and you can have up to 28 lamps, all of the same voltage, with one slight caveat, on each power board. These are the two inputs, and obviously you would use one or other. There is a third input because you can daisy chain these power boards together, and that's where it would receive the power from the board that's got the direct power source, and that's where the power goes out again. The key thing for us is this bit here. If I bring it up, you will see that you can set this to be either direct or 3 volts. It's set with this jumper, and the jumper is set for 3 volts because obviously it's to the left. If I set it to the right, it would put power to these terminals at whatever rate it's coming in here. So obviously if you want to use 12-volt lamps and you have a 12-volt supply coming in here, I tend to use this terminal rather than the pins, rather than the socket. The blue thing here is the dimmer, which allows you to obviously make the thing lighter or darker, and that's really quite useful if you don't want all your lights at full power, as was the case with the market stalls, that they have been turned down. They are not at full power. It was really quite bright, very exciting and hip place. The blocks that I tend to use are these ones here, which are just simple screw terminals, which you'll have seen. The first one I got from this, I think that's all I got was this. And successively, as I've been ordering them, more and more things come to you. And in the current package, one of the things that I've noticed that's in here is this switch. And the switch is capable of being fixed onto this terminal at the back here to allow for remote control, so that you can turn this power board on and off by using the little switch, which I think is quite a very useful thing to have actually, and you just get it as part of the kit now. And the price of this has not altered from when I first started getting them. The other big change is in the number of cables that you now get to assist you in using all the terminals. When I first got it, I just got the power board, and these JST plugs that go in here, you can get hold of them. I've never tried to actually wire any up, but what you get in the kit now, if I separate these out a bit, is you can see that you've got a series of JST plugs with cable on them, which you would then obviously just from the other end, which is blank, there we go, you would just solder those into the cables coming off your lights, and you've obviously got enough plugs to fill the 6 sockets that are here. And perhaps of even more value, I'll move those out of the way, you've got a series of these cables with the tiny little pins to use in the sockets at the top, which is really a very useful piece of kit indeed. And as I said, you can daisy chain, if I can find the right thing here. Nope, that's not it. There it is. You can daisy chain, and they give you the cable to daisy chain with from, this would be the input, so this would come in from another board, that would go out to another board. I don't know how many boards you can actually do. Well, I think, no, I do. You can do as many boards as you need, provided the output voltage is lower than the input voltage. So the total voltage required of all the lamps that you're running, plainly, must be less than the power you're putting, or the voltage that you're putting in. I'm not a great one on electrics, so I'm not going to say any more. As I said, there are really good instructions, full illustrated instructions on the web page. But these are just brilliant, I have to say. And in fact, you don't, when you daisy chain them, you can set these independently. So you can have voltage coming in here. The voltage going out there is just direct. And then on one board you can have a load of 12-volt lights, and on another you can have 3-volt lights. And you may recall me saying in the last video that I thought both my boards were running at 3 volts. In fact, one is running at 12, and so that's how you can mix them up. You can mix on an individual board, so you could put 12-volt lights on that side and 3-volt lights on this side, but, big but, you would have to put a resistor in, which to my mind rather removes the point of having this thing at all. As I said, it's a really good piece of kit. You've seen the picture of the one, which I'll just pop back up now, that's now wired in from the kit that Mark sent to me. So if you're thinking about how am I going to wire lots of lights, this is the baby for you. You will need to be careful, of course, excuse me, that you don't have too much in way of voltage coming out of the board more than you're putting in. That's still a bit of a dark art to me, but as I have nowhere near that number of lights that would cause a problem, I don't have to worry about it too much. So that's what this power distribution board looks like. The links to it are in the description. As I said, apart from the gift from Mark, I've bought all of these myself. There's no affiliate links in any of the links that are in the description. And it is just a very useful piece of kit. So that brings us to the end of this episode for this week, and indeed for this year. A year in which the engine shed has loomed large in the videos, but with other things have been done. The scrapyard is half built. The gasworks is now pretty much finished. It's got some more weathering and things to be done with it. We've added figures to the layout in a way which I wouldn't have imagined, and obviously the markets has finally got into how I wanted it to look. The bungalows have arrived up at High Elven, and indeed the little parish church, the brass etch kit from 7 models, which I was very pleased with. It only remains for me really now to wish you all really a very happy new year, a healthy new year. It's been a really interesting year once again. 2 interesting years together seems like an indulgence, but there we go. Let's all hope for the best in 2022, and that in about 7 or 8 weeks' time, some of us at least can get to meet each other at Model Rail Scotland. And indeed, Model Rail Scotland 2019 was the last exhibition that I was able to go to before pestilence and scourge started stalking the land. I do hope you have a good time over New Year, and as I say, I wish you all the best for the new year, and I'll speak to you again in about a fortnight's time, and we'll see what, if anything, I have managed to do in that intervening period. But until then, that's bye-bye from me. Bye-bye.